It was supposed to be just another Friday night rush. The kind where the noise of plates clattering and waiters shouting blends into a constant, comfortable chaos. Nobody noticed the man who walked in at first, but everyone would be staring at him before the hour was up. He pushed the door open slowly, as though unsure if he even belonged inside. His coat was filthy, more patch than fabric, and his shoes were little more than scraps of rubber tied together with string. The smell of rain and something sour followed him in, drawing a few wrinkled noses from the corner booths. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't ask to be seated. He just shuffled to a small table in the back, head down, and sat there with his hands folded. The chatter in the restaurant dipped just slightly, enough for the waitress to glance at him and then roll her eyes. The kids at the big table in the center giggled behind their menus, one of them muttering something loud enough for the others to snicker. A man at the bar actually shook his head and sneered. The homeless man didn't flinch. He just sat there, still, quiet, like he'd been waiting for this moment for a long, long time. Be honest, what would you have done in that restaurant? If you saw him sitting there, in his ragged coat, in the corner, not hurting anyone? Would you have laughed? Or something else? Tell me how you feel in the comments. The waitress finally sauntered over, her notepad in one hand, the other on her hip. She didn't even bother to hide her disgust as she leaned on the table. You gonna order something? Or just sit there? The man looked up, and for the first time, everyone got a good look at his face. It was older than they thought, lined and weather-beaten, with piercing gray eyes that didn't seem to belong in a man dressed like that. His lips curled faintly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "I'll just have a cup of coffee," he said quietly. The kids at the big table snorted. "That's all he can afford," one of them jeered, loud enough to draw a laugh from his friends. But the man didn't look at them, didn't even seem to hear them. He just sat there, hands folded, eyes fixed on something none of them could see. Something they wouldn't understand, until it was far too late. The coffee arrived, steaming faintly in a chipped white mug. The homeless man didn't touch it right away. He simply sat with his hands wrapped around it, staring into the dark liquid like it held answers. The kids at the big table kept glancing over, laughing behind their hands. One of them snapped a photo on his phone, whispering something about posting it online. The man at the bar muttered under his breath about people like that ruining decent places. But the homeless man never looked up, never said a word. The waitress came by a few times, sighing loudly, tapping her pen on her notepad. Once, when she thought he wasn't looking, she wiped her hand on her apron after picking up his empty plate. And still he sat there, quiet, patient, unbothered. It wasn't until she came to clear his table that she noticed something odd. A wallet. It was sitting on the edge of the table, half tucked under the napkin holder. She frowned, picked it up without asking, and felt its weight in her hand. It was heavier than it looked. Out of sight of the customers, she cracked it open just enough to see what was inside. Cash. A lot of it. Crisp bills stacked in neat folds. A little silver money clip. And a photo, worn at the edges, but unmistakable. A younger man in uniform, shaking hands with the mayor at some ceremony. A medal on his chest. A headline she could just barely make out. Local hero saves dozens in factory fire. Her eyes dotted back to the man in the corner. He hadn't moved. But now, she could feel him watching her. How would you feel in her place? You've been laughing, sneering, rolling your eyes, and then you find out who he really is. Would your stomach sink? Would you feel ashamed? Tell me honestly, in the comments. The waitress closed the wallet fast, shoving it into her apron pocket, her hands suddenly shaky. When she returned to his table, her voice cracked just slightly. "Anything else, sir?" He shook his head once, slowly. "No," he murmured. "Thank you." He stood, left a few bills under the mug, more than enough to cover the coffee, and turned toward the door. For the first time all night, the restaurant fell completely silent. All eyes followed him as he walked past the kids' table, past the man at the bar, past the waitress, still clutching his wallet behind her back. And just before he stepped out into the cold night, he stopped. And smiled. That faint, almost sad smile again. But his gray eyes, they didn't look sad at all. They looked like he knew something none of them would ever forget. The bell above the door chimed softly as the man disappeared into the cold night. Nobody moved for a few seconds after he left. The kids at the big table stared at each other in awkward silence, their laughter long gone. The man at the bar swirled the last of his whiskey and didn't meet anyone's eyes. Even the cook in the kitchen leaned out, wiping his hands on his apron, sensing the heavy quiet that hung in the air. The waitress still stood at the counter, his wallet clutched in her hands. It wasn't until the youngest of the kids finally muttered, "What was that about?" that anyone breathed. She didn't answer. She didn't say anything at all. She just flipped the wallet open again and stared at the photograph tucked behind the cash. The man, cleaner, younger, but unmistakably him, shaking hands with the mayor. The little gold medal pinned to his chest shining in the flash of the camera. The words of the headline kept ringing in her head. Local hero saves dozens in factory fire. Her throat felt tight as she picked up the phone and dialed. It rang only once before someone on the other end answered with a brusque, official tone. "Yes." She cleared her throat, feeling her face flush under the gaze of every customer in the restaurant. "Hi, sorry to bother you," she began, fumbling for words. "But, do you know a man named Robert Graham?" The silence on the other end of the line was immediate. Then a low voice replied, "What did he say to you?" Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. He didn't say much," she stammered. He just came in, sat down, ordered coffee, paid for everyone, and then he left. But he dropped this." She held up the wallet, though the voice on the other end couldn't see it. "Where is he now?" the voice interrupted, sharper now. She swallowed hard. "He just left." The voice cursed under its breath, then said quickly, "Don't let him leave town. Do you understand me? Don't let him disappear again." Before she could respond, the line went dead. She slowly lowered the phone, staring at the receiver like it might explain something. But it didn't. When she looked up, every eye in the restaurant was on her. She could feel the questions burning in their stares. But all she could think about was the faint, knowing smile he'd given her before walking out. And how much colder the room felt now that he was gone. By the time the waitress ran outside, the street was empty. No sign of him. Not even footprints on the wet sidewalk. She stood there for a long time, clutching his wallet, her breath clouding in the frigid air. Somewhere behind her, the bell above the restaurant door jingled as the others inside began murmuring again, finally breaking their silence. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her little apartment, staring at the ceiling with the wallet sitting on her nightstand like it was watching her. The next morning, she couldn't help herself. She called the number back. It rang once, twice. Then a voice, not the same as before, answered. "This is the Veterans Association," it said flatly. Her stomach dropped. "I'm calling about Robert Graham," she whispered. The pause on the line was longer this time. Then a heavy sigh. "Did he do anything?" the voice asked quietly. She blinked in confusion. "No. I mean, not really. He came into my restaurant last night, paid everyone's bill, and then he just left." The voice didn't answer at first. Then it said, "He's been missing for almost 5 years." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" The man on the line sighed again. "After the fire, the one you probably saw in the newspaper photo, he kind of fell apart. Didn't want the medals. Didn't want the recognition. Said he hadn't saved enough. He just walked away from it all. Nobody's seen him in years." "Not really." The waitress sat there in stunned silence, staring down at her hands. "He still carries the cash," the man on the line continued. "Still helps people. But he never stays in one place. He doesn't want anyone to know who he is. Doesn't want the thanks. He just disappears again." Her eyes stung as she whispered, "Why?" The man's answer was simple. "Because that's who he is." The line went dead. She hung up and sat there for a long, long time. That afternoon, when she returned to her shift, the wallet was gone. No one had seen him come in. No one had seen him leave. But somehow everyone knew. They all felt it, the quiet shame in their stomachs when they thought of how they'd laughed. How they'd sneered. And the faint trace of something else too. Something harder to name. Something that felt a little like hope. The waitress picked up the coffee pot, moving between tables as usual, but her eyes kept darting to the door. Somewhere out there, he was still walking, still helping, still disappearing before anyone could say thank you. Now it's your turn. If he walked into your life, quiet, humble, invisible, how would you treat him? Would you laugh, or would you see him for who he really is? Tell me in the comments below. And maybe, just maybe, look a little closer next time.